I mean, recording.
Right
Yeah, we are today.
Right on the recording sheet, late.
Yeah.
Late for my present.
Didn't have the memory card in the machine last week for you. I had it at home, and then I was in quarantine. So
yeah, no, that's fine. All right, so we're gonna do relating to the unchurched.
Good topic.
Because what I like about this, so what's it talking about? Relating to the unchurched. What does that mean to anybody here?
Trying to have like conversations with people that don't believe what you believe, and like trying to relate to them and stuff, I guess.
Yeah. What does that mean for anyone else? You and I, we can chat in this room quite comfortably about all sorts of things, but if this was your bunch of friends, you may not be having these conversations. Anyway, that's... So, yeah. What other...
You need to have friends outside of church.
You do. You do.
How are people going to know unless you preach?
Correct.
Unless they learn.
Unless you can relate to them.
You might be the only Bible someone ever sees.
Hey, there you
Damn.
go.
That's a bar.
It's true.
And it's absolutely true. Yes.
I like
Thanks. Thought of it myself.
this.
So what this little summary, and yes, we can read around, it's really summarising is that whole, you and I, or certainly me at this stage, and Phil, our allegiance, who we follow, who we've decided to link our life to, is Christ. Our allegiance is with that. Therefore, there's all sorts of, we've just been talking about countries, Russia, this, that. We've been talking about the Australian vote. We've been talking about all these other things that happen. And you can very easily want to get behind or get into this and let's do this. Let's make a difference. Let's get rev. So, but then the point is, who are you revving for? So,
Probably the wrong thing.
sorry?
Thank you.
Probably the wrong thing.
Yeah. So there's all these people, countries have their own vested interests. They have their own, they're willing to switch on and say, right, we're going to war. You're part of this country. You're now forced to kill. You're forced to do all these sorts of things. So potentially these countries, they have got a fair bit of sway and persuasion over the people that live within those countries. And you and I, we can get so caught up, and hey, I read the news and I could get so caught up in all this kind of stuff. But hey, you've got to almost lift above that. I guess what I'm saying is saying, hey, you know what? I know something. I've been baptized towards that. I've linked myself to Christ, and Christ is the one where my allegiance is. So therefore, you connect with that, but it says that you've got to be in this world, but not of this world. So you need to be able to relate. You need to be able to work. You need to be able to connect. You need to be able to so easily, and I think Christadelphian community has traditionally been quite aloof in a lot of things. It's been quite removed, and it's quite, what's the word? Weird. But as a result of that, this is the whole point of this morning, is that we're not to be weirdos. It's not about being weirdos. It's not about, it is about being with our allegiance with Christ, connect to those things and let that be that fruit of the Spirit that we're talking about, that intent that's happening in our life. And then, once you've got that naturally happening, honestly, like, as in, people shouldn't be seeing you as a weirdo. Does that make sense?
I think it's all about how you connect with people.
Correct.
And the attitude with which you do it.
Yes.
So relating just requires a connection to a person. And if you go in all guns blazing, I'm right, I've got all the information, the wall goes up straight away. And I guess, Christadelphian community has always had, well-meaning doctrinal issues front and centre, out in the public, out in the community. You drive down Goodwood Road and the sign's up, and it's like, Russia's about to attack Israel or something. There's some political event that is aligned to the Bible, and it's right in someone's face, but it hasn't actually connected with the person. It's a absolutely really good piece of scripture to talk about. I'm not bagging what they're doing at all, but I'm saying, hey, is that connecting to your audience? And I think as Christadelphians, as a community, we haven't done a great job connecting with the audience. Really, we've soapboxed really well, but the town square's empty now. No one's listening.
Funny story, actually. On the bus on the way to uni, we drove past a sign and it says, "Jesus will return." And a guy sitting in front of me is pointing and banging at the window. And the reaction on the bus, everyone was just giving him weird looks. So, yeah.
It didn't create a great place to start a conversation,
Yeah.
I guess. It started from adversary. Yeah. So it starts from a place of adversarial.
Just based on Matthew 5, verse 16, it's a great verse. It says, "Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify the Father who is in heaven." So it's
That's such
good
a good one.
works.
Such a good one.
Christ draws on that.
Show by doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, hey, this guy isn't acting like everyone else. They're doing weird things. They're not doing this that other people do, and they're not doing that we do. They're different.
Good different.
Good different. Because it's good works. And that is a light, and that's the light before people. And so they see that, they're like, oh, this person's got an aura around them. They're behaving differently. So you pay attention to them. And because that's the whole point of, you've got different passages of Christ moving around, and people can tell what's going on because of the compassion going on around him. Yeah. It's the good works.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've all been to Rundle Mall, but there's probably you probably might have seen this guy just yelling, preaching the Bible.
Oh, yeah, there's
But-
a girl as well.
Yeah, it's not really. You don't I don't try and avoid them, but I'm not going to go up to them and have a conversation. But I feel like if they had a sign saying, "Do you want to learn about the Bible?" maybe you might feel more inclined to walk up to them or something instead of them just
talking at people.
instead of them saying, "In the beginning." It's like,
There was this one guy down there when I went, and he wasn't yelling at everyone, but he literally just I was walking past, he came up to me and he started talking, but it was like a very one-sided conversation. I didn't get any say, and it was all just
Telling, not
telling,
listening.
and it wasn't explaining anything. It was just demanding all this stuff, and it was just not a good conversation.
It attracts the crazies.
Yeah, I mean, every time you see, you read a passage about what Jesus did when he interacted with the people, you don't really, apart from where he turns the tables over in the temple when he was angry at the merchants, you don't really ever see a conversation starting from a place of controversy or adversary. It always starts from a connection. Yes. It always starts from a woman drawing water or
Someone's sick.
someone who touched me.
Yeah.
There's a connection that starts the story every time.
When would be the right time to talk while preaching?
To talk?
How do you find the right time
Yeah.
to preach?
Okay.
Where are you? Good.
Look,
That's a great
okay,
question.
Yeah, good. Because, and I think you've got onto the right path in the fact that it's really by what you're doing, let's face it, we've often said this before, if the well was filled with fruit of the Spirit, and when I say that, it'd be a great place to live. Does that make sense? So therefore, naturally people enjoy it when they see something which is good, different. Okay? So they naturally they like it when they are listened to, when there's kindness shown, when there's this kind of thing. And it's once you've built that relationship, it's from there that you can then start having conversations about what this is all about. And I've got this allegiance which is different, and I'm being told that I've got to live my life looking out for others. I've got to live my life doing this, and this is the way I live my life, and you've seen that. Yep.
I was just so yeah, to touch on your point, Matthew, I conveniently don't know the verse, but where it says a word in season is
that's
very important.
That's on
So
the back of my
let me-
wide margin Bible.
let me give you an example. I was at work, we were doing things, and then somebody said, oh, there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done, and everyone groans. It's like nobody wants to do it. I put my hand up, I go do it, and they're like, just like that all by yourself, you took one for the team, and I was just like, well, I'm just thankful that I was able to do that. It's my job. This is what I'm blessed in order to be able to do this, right? And it's just like that little, oh, okay, they must have a religion, and that gets them curious. And then later down the track, they say, hey, you're a religious person, aren't you? I said, yes. And then they've got a question. You're able to answer that question.
Correct.
When they're the ones who come to
Correct.
It's
That's the
Proverbs
best way to start the
15,
relationship.
Verse 20.
you don't go to them because they're going to be like, oh, thanks, but who asked? You know what I mean? They didn't ask.
Yep.
So you let them come to you. And it's, through your works.
Yes.
Sorry, Matthew, what was it? Proverbs
15, verse 23.
You want to read it out?
A man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season.
Not everyone is John the Baptist,
and-
so we can't just go up and...
And pairing with that, Proverbs 25, verse 11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pitchers of silver.
Ooh, golden apples.
fitly spoken is an interesting turn of phrase, isn't it?
It
is.
Fitly means it had to fit the feeling of the room, the way
Yeah,
the person
yeah,
was
yeah,
ready
yeah.
to listen.
And
To be fit
yeah.
in conversation is to understand how that person is ready to receive information.
And it's true, because if you think about it, if something can be fitly spoken, that means words can be put in the wrong place too, which is, where people talking about scenarios where it just doesn't feel right.
There's a place for direct, quite brutal conversation. There is a place for that, but it's not in every conversation. It's quite rare that you really need to use that. And it's, I don't know, and to answer Matthew's questions earlier, when's the right time? For me, it's always when someone has probably prompted the conversation themselves.
Yes, that's what
so you've
you're
got to that point. So you've got to the point where they've asked something, or you've planted enough seeds around for them to come and ask. They've gone, you started talking about Ukraine war and go, oh yeah, but I think a bit differently than that, and then you move on and don't necessarily say something. And they might come up and go, why do you think differently? What's going on here? They're ready to listen now.
But it's important that, we were talking about this in an earlier Sunday, it's important to show that you are listening to them. So if you
100%.
are
Yes.
telling them back, oh, so you think this and this, and they'll be like, yeah, you get me, you know what I mean? And then they might be a little bit more receptive to what you might say because they can see that you're being an active listener. So it's only mutual for them to listen to what you have.
And it's the best way to deal with really difficult topics. Like to let them come to a place where they're ready to listen to another side of a discussion. If people are drawn lines in the sand and they cannot listen to anything else, you're probably going to do more harm than good by having a conversation.
It's interesting. I saw this really good, or have heard this really good podcast, but it was about truth in love.
Yep.
Ooh, heck. And how often Christadelphia has gone down the truth line to say it's all about truth. It's all about the one way speaking. It's all about not listening. It's all, and so therefore, the second you, and it's funny enough, we can even see that someone often does something wrong, if that makes sense, and you go to them, and if you're just there to correct them, or
The rod of discipline.
and it's all about, but this is the truth, and therefore, and honesty is the best medicine. Often you hear this, honesty is the best medicine. it is when it's with love. Honesty just out of honesty. Because often, look, I can be a little bit, what's the word? And I have had a tendency in the past to be a bit blunt, a bit straightforward, and say, hey, you know what, this is what it is. It's black and white. Just take this. Bang. And as soon as you've done that, you've lost the fruit of the Spirit. Yeah. You've lost all the bits that you've been talking about, which were in love, in respect, in kindness, in...
There's ways to
wipe
tell
that
which
out.
word.
You wipe that out by bluntly going straight to it.
So yeah, and you know, you get to talk about preaching, and it's why. So the motive behind it. Why are you preaching? I'm preaching because I was told to. Okay, so you're just there spouting words, or are you there because you actually care about that other person finding truth? Like, or are you there because I want to be the person who looks like I've got all the knowledge and I'm right? So what's the attitude behind the preaching? If you actually ask yourself, what's my attitude about what I'm to do now? 9 times out of 10, probably more than that, 99 times out of 100, you'll be on the money.
Yeah.
If you've asked yourself, why am I doing it?
Yeah, that's like Craig Stone's camp, the camp we had last year, where he said in the next I think when you're in a scenario, in the next 3 seconds, do something that you're sure Christ would do. In that sense, that you're pausing when you see something, you think to yourself, can something be done, and would Christ do it? And that pushes you forward. And then he gives stories about different scenarios. Yeah.
Yep.
Another, actually, we heard it probably a couple of weeks ago, or no, probably a month ago. It was did people, what's his name? The guy, anyway, he talked about life, and it's almost like this river, and we're all in the little, what is it, tires, pump up tires, and we're floating down, or no, I wouldn't say barrels. We're all in our tubes. We're in our blow-up donut tubes going down this river. Now there's bits of rapids, it turns corners, it then gets to peaceful bits, it then gets to... And funny enough, as we're all going down this river together, so the whole lot of us are all in this bunch of tubes, and we kind of... It's funny, occasionally you'll bump into Lauren, and suddenly it's like, oh, chat, there's a connection there for a while, and then later in your life, suddenly you've gone off and then you went to rapids, and there was hard times in your life, and it was tough, and it was whatever, and then you bumped into someone else, and then it's suddenly, so our life isn't just, don't be afraid that, because we've got all these friends here now, those friends in 10 years' time may be different friends, and that's okay. Does that make sense? So just, life is one of those things which does change, and you do connect in with people, and then you disconnect, and that doesn't mean, if it's not being done in a nasty way. Hang on, what's going on over there? I don't know whether everything's going.
That's all right. I've muted their mic. I've muted their mic for a while.
Yeah.
Until they talk.
Yeah. So I guess my point being that as we go through life, we're connecting with different people, and then unconnecting with certain people, and then there's some people you connect with, and the second you connect with them again after can be 10 years, 20 years, it's just the same as it was before. And then there's others where it's not, and then there's others. So life, it takes all different paths, and as you go, there are times when, yes, you get opportunity, and this is that timing thing you were talking about. It's not about forcing your way. You can't do it. We had a talk from Andrew Fotheringham last weekend, and he said, well, to be honest, it's quite amazing. 90% of our lives, you and I think we've got control of our lives, and think we can do things, and think we direct it, and think about it. There's 90+% of our life we actually don't have control of. We didn't have control that you were born in South Australia. Hey, you know what? Somehow you happen to be the lucky dip that had a really lovely mum and dad, whatever. You are the one that suddenly we're connected here with this group. How all those things you've had nothing to do with. Does that make sense? And they were whopping big things in your life. So I guess there's a whole lot we can't change, but there's a whole lot as we float down this river, we are bumping into people, and it's then relating and unrelating, and you don't want to try and unrelate too much, but just realise life can be a bit soft. Life is better being compassionate and fruit of the spirits and softer than it is if you're being this hardcore hammer.
I think you want to be the person that if you're bumping into people, like you say, and they're bumping into you for a short period of time, you want to be the person they remember they want to go back to and talk to next time. That's,
Yeah. Sorry, I haven't even read your book.
No.
Put out some guidance.
I was just saying, do we want to skip to some
go on.
discussion points? Because since we've already discussed the topic. All right, let me find one. All right. In its early years, Christianity spread through the Roman world despite strong persecution, and Christians are persecuted nowadays in some countries. In Australia, we have legally protected freedom of religion, but people do sometimes express prejudice against us. People often reject our message. Is that persecution? Does it need to break friendships?
No. And no.
Why?
Well, everyone has the right to choose what they believe. So it's not persecution to not believe the same thing as someone. And
I think that's something that's drawn on quite a bit, because we can, sometimes in our own lives, we can be a bit controlling, making laws out of principles, where we say, don't do this and you shouldn't do this. But rather, we're called to do that for ourselves. So, I'm not going to do this. You can do it if you want, but I'm not going to do this. Being convicted of your own conscience. And that's the working of principle.
Yes.
And so that's something I think sometimes Christians can take out of hand and say, no, this you have to do this. And other times people can get hung up on, you want me to do this, and we're like, no, it's your choice. That's the whole point. It's that God's given us that free will for this small, limited amount of time to see what we're going to do with it.
and I think, that question there starts itself off by talking about, we live in a country where, it's not America where you have free speech. That's not what Australia is. But we do have a lot of freedom in our language that we use in public. And part of that freedom is you have to accept that people you don't like or hate are going to say stuff people that you hate are going to say stuff you don't like. And you enjoy the very same freedom. So, it's how you then place the fruit of the Spirit around what you've just said that differentiates you from the person that might have the poorer thing to say.
Does it have a naughty corner?
Oh, it's been nuts.
Yeah, I think this whole idea of preaching is something that is people like to put in a box. And if we talk about sharing ideas and connecting with the unchurched or relating with others, they like to go, these things are called preaching. When I read these passages and I share this information, that's preaching. But that's not quite true. Preaching is showing a reflection of Jesus to another person.
Yes.
And it comes from what you say, it comes from how you behave, it comes from the things that you tolerate, walk past, and the things you don't. So I think preaching is a whole life lived in service. And,
I'm just going to touch on that. Actually, when you see other people preaching in those ways, what they're doing, in a sense, is teaching, but nobody's ready to listen because they're not ready to be taught.
That's okay. As long
That's
as you keep
why-
it going.
That's why when people, they think they're preaching, but they're actually teaching, and they've got to be ready for it. So we discuss what preaching is. And once someone says teach me this. That's when we can
That's
go.
the right time.
Da 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 da
That's
da.
the right time.
And that draws on what Corey was saying. Rather than yelling out teachings or preaching, you could have a sign or a stall saying, like at the show. I've never been, but at the show they've got different stalls, and people that are interested in the stalls walk up to the stall, and that initiates the conversation rather than I'm calling you out. I'm just on my shopping trip. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
What should our stall be called? Meeting at the well.
Oh yeah, a lot of the time the preachers actually do like target people in the crowd as they're walking past, like
Especially people with LGBTQ.
Oh,
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
think if they can identify a difference, they'll zoom straight in on a difference.
yeah, and that's not gonna. No
Doesn't
one's
help.
gonna want to come up to someone that's abusing them.
feels singled out and then they don't want to listen.
That's not being very kind, is it?
And so if that's their only exposure to it, we've got to make sure we do our best to show the real thing. It's in our actions and our deeds.
Sometimes the best form of preaching is actually just not forcing it on people, just being a good person. So
Yeah. I mean, preaching, we've got to be. We do have to understand that there is a purpose to preaching. Like it is sharing the good news of Christ returned, Christ resurrected, and a new hope. There is that message that has to come through, but it's a life. It depends on the person. If we've tried to grab someone off the street and you feel like you've got 30 seconds to get your message across, you can't really use your behaviours and all of that to try and get the message across. You haven't got time. So, a couple of questions: A, are your motives right? B, are you using the right method? Have you connected to the person? Is there a plan to actually communicate this message of hope? So, it's there's a whole bunch of stuff in that has to be unpacked.
And just I did learn an amazingly good lesson when I was in Malaysia at one stage. I literally got, I physically packed up the whole family. I was exhausted and took them over to Malaysia to start this new job. And I was the principal consultant, so I was the main person which was running the show over there. And then I had this guy who was a 75-year-old Chinese boss, and he basically came in. I just lifted the whole family across there for a whole 3.5 years was the idea. The first week I landed, this guy hauled me into the office and he ripped me. I've never been ripped to shreds like this before, ever. And he literally just came in and he said, "Glenn, we've got you over here as the main consultant with all, and we're going to transform what we do with biomedical engineering." He said, don't you dare come over here and just teach us. I thought, wow. And he literally tore shreds off me. He basically said, "I am going to pack your family up. They can fly straight back to Australia." He just went off. And to be honest, I had 2 months of sleepless nights. It was just horrendous. It was probably the worst experience that I'd had where someone just ripped into me. But there's one lesson he taught me, and this is what he said. He said, "Glenn, don't you dare, as a consultant, come across to Malaysia believing that you have all the answers. Don't you dare come over here and get a blueprint of what you do and come over to us and just teach it. If you're just in teach mode, you're going to get nothing through to us." And he said, "You've got to come over here in teach mode, in share mode, in learn mode, in grow mode." And that's that relating, and that's that connection. In other words, what we do in Australia isn't necessarily what works in Malaysia. So therefore you've got to listen to what they're doing and actually morph it into what's actually going to work and a solution for them. So the point being, and I think Christadelphia has sadly, look, all your John Thomas and your Robert Roberts and everything, I think they were fairly serious bushbashers where they were debating, they were learning, they were growing. Funny enough, do you know where we get the statement of faith of what we have? Where did that come from? It was because America went into a civil war. And basically they were told that they said, "Hey, you've got to put something on paper as to what this all is." So they wrote down and they came up with this. And I think those early days, there was a whole lot of learning, a whole lot of growing happening. Does that make sense? Then a generation or so later, we switched from being learn, grow to teach. And then we're not listening anymore. We're just into this teach mode, which is so hard that, oh, well, look, we've got it all in the gold box. We've got all these things. This is now it. This is the gold. We're just going to hammer this. We're not listening. We're just going to be in teach mode.
Yeah.
Very dangerous. And that's exactly what this guy was saying. Don't come in teach mode. You've got to be in share mode, listen mode, grow mode, learn, and relatable.
Yeah, because that's actually something that a lot of other older brothers and sisters are actually worried about, is that the younger generation just being told what to believe rather than them actually learning it themselves and, putting in a bit of study and learning, what does this mean? What does that mean? Is that really what it means? And asking the hard questions, because that's what the pioneers were doing. And it's not that they had it all right, but they had the learning mode. And
correct.
that gets you to the right place.
Should I?
That's up to you.
No, that's right. As long as